Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back from lunch. We have our next two presentations for this afternoon. We have James Meese, who's going to talk to us today about tips for private wells and preparing a well for the winter training. So James, I'm going to turn it over straight to you.
All right, so hello, everyone. Sorry for all the technical difficulties. My name is James Meese. I'm with the Rural Community Assistance Program. As you can see on our screen here, here's our mission, and it's to improve surface water protection and environmental compliance for public health, help small and rural communities access funding for water and sewer projects, improve technical, managerial, and financial capabilities for water and sewer, and promote shared services and regionalization. As part of this program, we actually have a private well program as well, where we help homeowners with their private wells. What that consists of is that we will go to the homeowner's home, we will do an assessment of their well, and we will do well testing for them. Currently, we are doing bacteria sampling, but in the next year, we have a new grant, and we will be testing for nitrates and metals as well with the bacteria sampling. Part of this is that it's done at no cost because we are completely grant funded. So all of our services that we offer are at no cost. On top of the private well program, we also work with rural communities with managerial, technical, and financial assistance. When we talk about managerial assistance, we talk about working with boards, helping them kind of understand what goes into a water system and sewer system. Same thing with the technical and the financial side as well, helping them access grants to funding and anything of that nature. And again, all of this is done at no cost. We are, since we are grant funded, we do have some parameters, one being that our definition of rural is any community under 10,000, but that is it. 10,000 and under is not a big deal. Anything over that, we will have to charge a minimal fee for. So if you ever run across any communities that you think we can help, feel free to reach out to us. Just again about Great Lakes RCAP, just kind of looking at who we are, part of the Great Lakes community, and all of that. Again, we are divided into several different regions across the country, so this kind of shows. Here in Illinois, we are part of the Great Lakes region, so we also work with Michigan, Wisconsin, Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, and Kentucky. Okay. So that is the beginning of our presentation here. I'm actually going to move to a different one real quick. Right. So today we are going to talk about, we'll start by talking about heading south for the winter. What do you do to ensure a return to safe drinking water source within your drinking water system? Again, we had done that. Here's just a typical disclaimer saying this project has been funded wholly in part by the United States Environmental Protection Agency, but we do not represent them. They did help fund this though. So when we're talking about preparing for wells for the summer or for the winter, we have a few things. You know, you're preparing to leave, you pack your clothes and other household items, you know, you forward your mail, but do you winterize your well? This is primarily looking at snowbirds, people moving south. I know it's kind of an important thing this time of year, people getting ready, and a lot of people won't realize that their private well, they need to, you know, get that ready and secure that so they don't have any health or safety issues when they return. So why is this important? One of the big things we look at is premise plumbing issues in the news. This is especially very important in Illinois. I'm talking about Legionnaire's disease, and it can form in a private well system as well. If you have that water within your system, that you leave it there, that it basically gets old within the system, and if it's not being treated or you have no treatment whatsoever and it's not being flushed on a regular basis, it can lead to issues with Legionnaires. So quick background on Legionella. It's the most prevalent in aquatic and moist environments. So again, we're talking, you know, your premise plumbing, the plumbing within the household. Now, it occurs in distribution systems and premise plumbing. It was first identified in 1976 at an American Legion convention in Philadelphia, hence the name. and it includes over 50 species, many of which are pathogenic. How it can affect building and water systems. It's transmission only by aspiration. So you cannot get Legionella by drinking it, but you can by breathing it. That being said, that is, if it is in your drinking water system and you run that and that Legionella comes out and you start to breathe it, that is when problems occur. As many of you probably know, biggest example of this in Illinois was the Quincy Veterans Home a couple of years ago that had a number of deaths and health issues from Legionella in a Legionella outbreak. That is obviously the worst case scenario, but even it causing any sort of issues, or it can cause death within, if you do breathe it within your own private home. It occurs in two forms, Legionnaire's disease and Pontiac fever. Legionnaire's disease is pneumonia, high fever, respiratory, multi-organ failure or death, or fever, muscle aches, mild respiratory infection, and is flu-like. Factors within buildings and systems that promote Legionella, high temperatures. So this can occur, especially if you have water near a hot water heater, or even in the summers if you leave for the summer, if you're that type of person. But even in the winter, it can occur if that hot water heater is running, if you haven't turned it down, or if you have a particular area near the furnace where that water is getting heat. Biggest problem is going to be stagnation. That kind of causes Legionella as well. If that water is sitting within the plumbing on a regular basis, if it's not being moved, if it's not being flushed, if it's just sitting in those pipes, that is when the big problem with stagnation can occur, especially even if the homeowner does treat their well. Over the course of time, that treatment can break down and that Legionella can come through and break through. So even if there is some form of treatment or filtration, if it's not being flushed on a regular basis, Legionella can still be an issue. You also can look at biofilm growth, scale and sediment, and disinfection loss. So that's why I was stating earlier that disinfection can break down and erode over time and allow Legionella to come. We'll skip that. So we talked about before leaving your home, you want to select a friend or relative to complete a weekly check of your home plumbing. What this would come and be is kind of look at the plumbing, make sure everything's going well, but most importantly would be to also flush the system out a little bit. Again, making sure that that water is not sitting there, not being stagnant, not having an issue. You want to look at your household temperature, make sure that it's not getting too high. Any power surges or backup power as well. You want to make sure that you have some sort of backup power within it, especially if you have a generator. You also want to make sure you're running that generator every now and then to make sure it's working, just in case you get home. You don't want your pump to sit stagnant for too long. If it sits stagnant and is not running, it's not going to start up right away. You're going to have to prime it a little bit and get it going from when you get home. So if you can get someone there to kind of make sure all that's okay. You want to look at insulation, any heat tape. You want to look at your hot water in your hot water system, make sure that's running, make sure that heater's running. And you also want to make sure that your treatment system, if any, is working and doesn't need to be changed. You know, make sure your filters don't need to be switched because they have been sitting there over a long period of time as well. So yeah, you want to checking and flushing plumbing each week. You want to ensure that heat tape is functioning. So you want to make sure any heat tape that you have wrapped around any of your plumbing is working and is keeping it warm. You want to flush all waters, hot and cold faucets, shower heads, dishwashers, and washing machines on a weekly basis. And again, that is to help avoid both Legionella or just any sort of sediment or buildup within the system that has been there. Water systems are built to be used. They're not built to be, to sit stagnant for months at a time. It's just simply not the best way to do that. You want to flush faucets for 2 to 3 minutes, starting on the lowest floor and move upwards. Start with cold water first and then hot water. That is going to be because that cold water is going to be basically the freshest water in there, but it's also going to be the oldest water. While that hot water you're going to have, it's going to be coming from the hot water tank So you're basically just draining two different forms within your house. Your flow of water should be even to ensure that the removal of any loose fillings or pipes. To winterize your plumbing, you want to turn on water supply at the main shutoff valve. So you want to make sure, one, you know where that main shutoff valve is, and you want to make sure you have a turn of the water supply at the main shutoff valve. You want to turn gas or electric to boiler and water heater, so you want to make sure that you have that going on. You want to siphon water from clothes, washer, tub. Again, you want to make sure that none of that water is sitting there, none of it's an issue. For hot water heat, open drain faucet to boiler, remove air vent from radiator on the top floor, and allow for hot water lines to drain or boiler. You want to start on the top floor, opening all hot and cold water faucets and include showers and tubs and outdoor faucets, and flush all your toilets. You want to open drain faucets on hot water heater and hot water systems. Be careful of hot water. You want to drain the main supply line. You also want to double check that all areas where water is collected is drained. And you want to follow the process to add non-toxic propylene glycol antifreeze sold for vehicles to make sure that where the water may remain. You also want to make sure you winterize your pump. So when we're talking about the whole water system of the house. We're not talking just the main one. So you want to make sure you winterize your pump. You want to turn off main water supply to houses and turn breaker to the well off. Again, do not turn off the main breaker, though. You want to drain water from the water lines as directed in the previous slides. You want to unplug or disconnect power to the pump. If deep well, no further action is required. So you want to make sure that you do disconnect some of the power from that pump. And suction pumps loosen hose clamps attaching main feed lines to pumps with a bucket under to catch water that spills when disconnecting. Quick tip there, put up signs over taps, toilets, and switches for plumbing items to include well numbers. This will prevent accidental mishaps and be a reminder of you when returning home. All right, so most important thing though is you want to enjoy your time away while you're away, knowing that your well is safe, that it is ready. Again, most important things from this though are going to be having that flushing, having someone come on a regular basis to help flush out that, making sure that you don't have any power to your pump. And if you do have power to your pump, making sure that it works on a regular basis and you are pumping that water in. Returning home before or immediately upon returning to ensure safe drinking water, you need to de-winterize. So obviously we've winterized, now we need to de-winterize. You want to make sure you check your plumbing and pump, and you want to do disinfecting and any testing. To de-winterize your pump, you want to visually inspect all supply, piping, drains, and plumbing. You want to make any needed repairs, remove antifreeze before making such repairs. You want to close all faucets, indoor and outdoor, including water supply shutoff valves and supply piping drains, and you want to turn on your water supply at the main valve. So again, you want to make sure that you turn that on. For the well pump, you want to turn or shut off valve to the water tank. You want to turn on the valve between the water pump and the pressure tank. For the suction pumps, the pumps will need to be primed. So again, if you do have a suction pump and it's been turned off, you're going to want to get that primed and ready to go. You want to turn on power to the water pump. Be sure the pump turns on and pressurizes the water tank, and that all turns on. So again, you want to make sure everything's working within there. You want to check for any leaks or water main valves, water pump tanks, and supply piping. And you want to make sure repairs. Again, we all know things that sit over a period of time can have leaks within them or cracks or any sort of damage. So you want to make sure nothing's happened over the course of the winter. You want to open water shutoff valves to each area of the home one by one. And you want to turn on and test each fixture. For disinfection, it's best to leave disinfection mixture in the well for 24 to 48 hours. So again, that is something you can purchase, and you want to put that in the well for 24 to 48 hours. It's best to have a licensed professional complete, so chlorine mixture is placed in well casing to depth of the water-bearing unit. So again, hiring a plumber or a private well professional would be the way to do this. You probably could do it yourself, But to make sure that you're safe and everything is okay, definitely always hire a professional. You want to bypass the treatment system, but have the treatment system checked for bacteria growth by appropriate professional. Again, if you have any filters or anything in there, you want to make sure that there's no bacteria that grew within those filters, those water softeners, anything that was kind of sitting over that period of time. And disinfection needs to be included, and it includes hot water heaters, dishwashers, laundry tubs, and shower heads. Again, all things that could potentially have had water be sitting there that's gotten old and could either have a Legionella outbreak or any other sort of issues. Additional concerns, humidifiers attached to a hot air furnace. Again, those can be super dangerous because if they do have any of that water in there and they are constantly getting it, they are going to push out that. So that can cause a huge Legionella issue if you do have a breakout of one. Same thing with air conditioning towers, if you have any outdoors, and shower heads and faucets. Seal of safety, you want to make sure that you have a negative total chloroform test. So again, you want to make sure that you take that sample. Typically, these samples can be purchased either online or through the Department of Public Health. And you can run it through there. They will test it through the county. It takes a few days, and they will tell you if you have any issues with your well. With that, if there's any questions, feel free to share them in the chat. If not, we will move on to our next presentation. Yep. As the same one again. Yep. So this training's, this portion of it is going to kind of just look at some of the basics of private wells, practice tips for private wells, testing, maintenance, and we're going to talk a little bit about financial assistance and kind of some of the programs that are out there, but we're not going to go super deep into it. So again, this is our network, the RCAP network. We were all kind of, aware of that. We had, kind of talked about that earlier, so we'll do that. Again, these are our main funders here, HHS, Health and Human Services, USDA Rural Development, and US EPA. So they help fund this training. So again, the disclaimer is saying that we do not represent any of those agencies. So topics covered in this presentation: types of water systems and how to identify, well logs and how to obtain, testing, why, when, what, and where, maintaining your wellhead for protection, and then a few things on financial assistance programs. So just talking about your types of wells here, you have your bored wells, your hand dug wells with a hand pump, your drilled wells, and driven or sand point wells. I will say the majority that I see in the state of Illinois past the 1950s have been drilled wells. It's just pretty standard and it's easy. We do come across a couple of bored wells, especially in the southern part of the state, though. And then not a lot of hand dug wells. I have seen some with hand pumps attached, and also same with driven or sandpoint wells. I do know there's a few sandpoint systems in the northern part of the state, but I don't run into a whole lot of them. Another issue you can also have with springs. So having springs, again, having a natural spring, we do see them on occasion, but they are a rarity in our state. So again, if you want to share it in the chat or just unmute yourself and speak, what type of wells do you guys see the most in your profession? I would imagine it's mostly drilled wells, but might be a little different. So, looking at maintenance and wellhead protection practices. Why maintenance is important. You want to maintain public health and you want to ensure source water protection. Again, your well is your water source within your home or any other homeowner's water source as well. So you want to make sure that you maintain that, and especially because Well repairs can be very expensive. Major well repairs are even more expensive, and drilling a new well is not cheap either. So you want to really make sure that all that is protected, and especially if you have a problem with the source water, then you're talking an even bigger issue on top of all that. So with wellhead protection, your well cap here, you want to always make sure that your well cap is bolted in and sealed. You would be amazed at the amount of homeowners I have who have a loose well cap that I see the bolts are not tightened or things have kind of fallen off and it's gotten loose through the year. People have a tendency to run into them with their mowers a lot. That's something that I see on a regular basis as well. So always just make sure that that well cap is secure, because I try to tell them anything that goes in there has the potential of coming back up. So you want to make sure that you don't have any of those issues with there. So if you're doing a well inspection for a household, or you are a homeowner with a private well, you want to make sure that that well cap is secured, tight, and looked at on a regular basis. Again, looking at it continued here, you know, we have some bent things. The well caps become unattached. The well cap might not even exist. So you want to make sure there's no bending or breaking or exposure, basically, is what you're trying to avoid the most. You do want to make sure that you have a vented cap as well. As you can see here, this is an example of a vented cap, and you want to make sure that you have that vent there with that screen. This becomes super important in cases of radon in the state, making sure that that radon gas is being vented. If not, then you can sometimes have an issue where that radon is coming up to the well, staying there, then going back down, and can come into a household. And I actually ran into this recently with a couple in Champaign who had this exact same issue. And they were trying to mitigate radon as best they could, but they did not think that their well could have been a potential source for it. So with working with them, they realized that they needed to get kind of a new well cap and make sure that they had that vented or screen. If there are any other noxious gases, this also helps prevent those. Also any sort of smell, that type of thing as well. It does help prevent that a little bit. Your casing, you always just want to make sure your casing's not cracked, not exposed, especially for the area that you can see. Again, state of Illinois has a variety of different casings that are allowed. Anymore, if it's a new well, we mostly see steel, but we do, I have seen some other ones as well. I did come across one or two brick line ones that have been super old wells that are still going, but those are unusual for the most part. You want to make sure that you have any sort of water diversion here. So this kind of shows that you want to make sure basically that your soil is sloped and away from the well. And basically this is to make sure that if any sort of water comes in, that there's no runoff into the well itself. So you're trying to divert as much water from the well as possible. You know, a couple other problems here, exposed wiring. We actually see a lot of this. It's a huge issue. Here, there on the very right, you can see that well is not tall enough. So that casing actually needs to be raised a little bit, and that wellhead needs to be raised. We usually want to go at least a foot to a foot and a half off the ground. But honestly, we see it quite a bit that wellheads have been installed, and either the ground has built up over the course of time and they're not there, or they're never installed properly in the first place. But it is about a foot to a foot and a half is what we're looking for. Also, you want to make sure your well looks like this. I was recently at a homeowner, and he had purchased the home without ever living on a private well or knowing anything about it. And his well was just a PVC pipe coming out of the ground with a cap on it. It had the pump and it had everything in there, but it wasn't properly sealed. There was no proper casing. There was none of that, and there wasn't even a proper well cap. So that's kind of the worst case scenario that we see, but we do want to make sure of that as well. Other recommendations, you want to make sure you have backflow prevention on your spigots. Again, through our assessments, we don't see a lot of this with homeowners. A lot of them, especially if they're new to having private wells or not knowing what they have, exactly. It's not something they think of, or they break off through the winter and they don't put them on. But basically what this is going to make sure is that there is no backflow into your plumbing system, and especially there is none into the well itself. A lot of people think of, they have their traditional house that's connected to community water. They don't realize that with a private well, there isn't constant pressure there. And if that pressure isn't there, then that well and that water and those hoses or anything that's in the yard can be sucked back in and then go back into their well. You want to make sure you have backup power as well, a generator or something of that nature. And that's simply because if your water goes out or, your power goes out, you do not have water. It's not the same thing as community water. So you want to make sure that you have that backup power, that you have things prevented. You want to protecting your casing as well. Make sure that your casing is there. Make sure that your casing is being protected. It's not being cracked, and there's nothing there that can infiltrate it. You want to maintain your septic system. We're going to talk about septic later in the day, but just knowing that have your septic system pumped, we suggest yearly. And I know that seems like a lot, especially I run into a lot of homeowners that say, well, I don't need it pumped yearly. Why would I pay for that? And that I understand. But what that does is it does make sure that you have a licensed professional come out and actually look at that septic and make sure that that septic is working and everything is properly being done on it. If not yearly, at least every 3 years is a recommendation as well. You want to never apply any fertilizer or chemicals within the 10 feet of well. And that is, again, to make sure that none of those chemicals or anything infiltrate the well and they don't leach in there or you don't have any problem. You want to keep all well and septic records to pass on to the next owner. This is super important. I can't tell you how many well owners have no idea about their well. They don't know how deep it is, when it was drilled, who drilled it, what the casing is, how old the pump is as well. And the only way they usually find out about it is once something goes wrong. So if you can highly suggest the homeowners, or again, if you have your own private well, keeping those records, any sort of maintenance records or anything that's done with the well becomes very, very important. New issue that isn't mentioned on here that you also might want to think about too is looking at the service line going from your well into your household. We have found that some of these are actually lead service lines, which can then lead to lead contamination within the household. So the easiest way to do that is to get a lead test and then test the water outside of your house through one of your hose spigots. Make sure there's no filtration and make sure it's a raw water sample. And it will kind of go through if you get a lead test kit, it will go through that. Unfortunately, you can only look at what's coming into the house. So if you can find what's going into the house and you might suspect it's lead as well, there's a number of things you can do to it. There's a scratch test. You can also see if it's magnetic. Other thing you want to look at too within your premise plumbing and the plumbing of the household is to make sure that you don't have any galvanized pipe connecting to copper. Galvanized steel to copper now can create lead issues, they're finding. So again, a few things to think about when talking to homeowners and making sure that they're aware that those are also potential issues. So talking about financial assistance, DLCAP does have a decentralized water system loan program. So we can help with water and wastewater, so wells and septics. It is an incredibly limited funding program. And the biggest thing that we run into with it is that for the median household income has to be below $32,000 to $34,000 a year. So it takes a very special case for individuals to be able to, be granted that financial assistance. But we do have it. It's a low interest loan program over the course of a number of years. Again, it's available this says Ohio, but it is available to individuals in Illinois now as well. So that has been expanded to the state of Illinois. I do have more information about that. So if you meet someone who you think can meet those parameters and is interested, feel free to reach out to me and I will get it for you. Your other criteria, you must own and occupy the residence with the existing system. So again, it can't be renting or anything. it has to be you have to own it. You have to legally filed land contracts are eligible. The health department determines if it's eligible for repair, replacement, or sewer tap after income qualified. So again, if you have an individual who's interested in it, a member of the health department will have to go through and investigate to see what exactly is available and any issues. If the home is listed for sale, the buyer is eligible, but not the seller. And all bidding goes through our RCAP network and is under contract with the health department, not the homeowner. Talk about other funding. The USDA does have a Section 504 program. This allows for improvements for public health, so well and septic are accepted. It is also very low income, and it's only available to those over the age of 62. Applications are through regional USDA rural development offices. So again, if you know anyone who'd be interested in this or are interested in it yourself, feel free to reach out to me, and I can get you connected with who at rural development would be the best to assist you with that. With that, do you have any questions? So that is the end of the slide. So I just want to talk about a few things that we are seeing in the state of Illinois as well, as far as major issues coming out. We're seeing cryptocerilium. We're seeing more and more cases of that for reasons. I'm not quite entirely sure why, but those are on the rise. Arsenic as well. We're seeing more and more arsenic kind of hit within the state of Illinois, and that does that can affect private well owners as well. We also are seeing, like I said, I mentioned the lead service lines going in and out of the household. I think that's going to be a major issue. Communities are working on it, but there is a concern that the members of the private well community will be left behind. And we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So we want to make sure that the private wells are good to go on that, and people are aware of any issues they may be having. We are also seeing more coming out slightly about PFAS, the forever chemical. I don't know how big of an issue it will be for private well owners because it takes a lot to have a PFAS issue. But if their source water is anywhere near where a PFAS outbreak could be, it could be it could cause an issue. So if you have any homeowners or anything that are slightly concerned about that, or have lived near a PFAS site or somewhere where they think PFAS outbreak could be occurring, let me know, and we can kind of look into information for them for testing and kind of really understanding what's going on there. And the final thing I wanted to talk about is just we are seeing more and more people buy homes who have never lived on private wells and not quite understanding fully what they're getting into. So I think a large part of what could be done here in the future is an educational impact on that. For instance, I had mentioned that I had that homeowner. He had purchased a house. He purchased it. He had never lived on a private well. He didn't do an inspection of his cap at all, so he probably needs to redo his casing. He needs to get that at least sealed off. As far as septic goes, it's a 3-bedroom house. Typically, for a 3-bedroom house, we look at a 2-chamber, 1,500-gallon septic tank. His septic tank was a 200-gallon tank, 1-chamber. So it was about 5 times smaller than it needed to be, even functional for the house. So again, we're not talking about well repairs that are going to be a couple $1,000s. Probably putting in a new septic tank that's going to be probably about $10,000 to $15,000. On top of that, he did not have any treatment system. He was actually getting dirt in his well, in his water. I highly suspect that that was because his well was not drilled deep enough. It was near a nearby creek, and I think he was actually pulling water from that nearby creek. If it was deep enough, obviously his casing was cracked, and he was getting infiltration from there as well. So just kind of letting homeowners understand exactly what the issue is. Same thing with hand pumps. We're seeing more and more people, they like the hand pumps, they like to install them. The problem with those are that they create major backflow issues. There is no way to prevent backflow with those hand pumps. You can possibly put on, if depending on the type of pump, a backflow prevention unit. But again, that's not going to be guaranteed to work on those particularly. So kind of educating and understanding that those hand pumps are not great and they're not going to be working, very well. So that's kind of another major issue that we're having with those. So we're kind of seeing some more issues with that. Also, recently there's been a rise, I think so, because I've seen more of it, of people having chickens in their backyard, which is great. The problem is that you have to understand you cannot allow your chickens to walk near your well because that can cause major nitrate issues. And you want to make sure that you don't have any runoff from that chicken coop near your well. It seems fairly obvious, but I've had a number of people who are like, no, we just let our chickens wander the yard. And that's great till they congregate near the well, which a lot of times they like to because they smell the fresh water and they're near it. So that also creates major issues. With that, I don't know, does anyone have any questions?
Okay.
So I have a question.
We do have a question here.
Yep.
Are they, in today's standards for building wells, are they allowed to have the equipment underground? At a well site? Is it like the pressure tank and the pump? I guess the pump's always underground, I don't know. But is the pressure tank allowed to be underground in today's standards?
I don't believe so. I'd have to double check on that. But typically, we see the pressure tank is going to be external. It's going to be in a basement. It's going to be somewhere where we can access it in a closet. We don't see a whole lot of underground pressure tanks. One of the best things would be to do is, because you have the code for private wells, but then you have a lot of your the county health departments will kind of know those standards as well. So reaching out to them would be a route to take.
Oh, okay.
Unless you work for the county health department, then going through and looking for the state. But we don't see a lot of pressure tanks on the ground. No. Typically you want to have. What's that?
Oh, I just did a few inspections recently where they were underground and you're going down to a confined space. So I just didn't know if there was any recommendations on that, for the inspector.
Yeah. So I mean, if they're in so the biggest thing you want to make sure is that you have access to it. So make sure it's not buried. So if they're in a confined space, as long as you have access to it, you should be fine. But you want to make sure that you don't cut off that access or bury it or anything.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right. Well, if there aren't any questions, I think we're coming back here at 3 o'clock to talk about septic tanks, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
All right. So anyone who comes on at 3, I will see you at 3 o'clock talking about septic.
Okay, thank you. I'll go ahead and pause the recording here and then restart it back up at 3. So we got about a 30-minute break for everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, hello everyone, welcome back. Today is our last session for today to wrap up our virtual sessions. We have James Neese with us again, and he will be talking to us about the basics of on-site wastewater treatment. So James, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to you.
All right, so welcome everybody. That first session we talked about wells. Well, typically if you have a well, you also have a septic tank. I mean, they're not always guaranteed 1-in-1. I have met private well owners who have had the ability to connect to city sewer, and they've done that, but they have not basically connected to their city water yet. So, I mean, it's not unusual for them to do it, but typically the two go hand in hand. So today we're going to be talking about basics of on-site wastewater treatment. On-site wastewater treatment is just a really fancy way of saying septic tank. It's basically there. This presentation was put together by the National On-Site Wastewater Recycling Association. They're the largest U.S. organization devoted to exclusively supporting members of the on-site and decentralized industry. And you can see kind of their mission statement there. But they did help create this presentation along with us at RCAP. Again, typical acknowledgement there, making sure everyone knows everything. There is no pre-test, so don't worry about that. I deleted that out. I'm not going to make you guys take any tests today. Learning objectives, you want to understand and function of an on-site wastewater treatment system. You want to gain knowledge about the various types of treatment and dispersal methods. So we're going to kind of go through some of the basics here, and depending on time, if we get through this, then we'll move over to a separate section kind of explaining some of the best practices that you can do if you have a septic system. So this presentation will supplement from this information user guide that is available. If you'd like a copy of it or you're interested in it, feel free to reach out to me. And before I leave today, I'll put all my information in the chat so you have that and we can get you a copy. So just looking at the overview, all septic systems collect wastewater. They allow for liquid and solid separation. They remove most of the wastewater products from the water, and they return the water to the water cycle. So ultimately, that's kind of the goal here, is really the main focus here is that collection of the wastewater, but you also want to look for that liquid solid separation. If that is not happening, basically you're not actually treating anything, you're just pumping sewage from your household out into your yard. So you want to make sure that you have that separation and that you remove most of the wastewater products from the water. So again, just thinking about how big is your water cycle. Water is continuously recycled. We depend on our septic systems to return safe water back to the water cycle through infiltration and evaporation. That's not always a super option, but kind of looking at it here in that water cycle that we have, basically the main thing here is that we want to pump out that safer drinking water that's been treated, and that is going to infiltrate the ground and go back in through there and re-enter the water table and that groundwater beneath us. And it's been filtered through your system, and then it will be naturally filtered through the sediment and the rocks. So wastewater treatment overview, a little bit of pre-treatment. It removes most of the solids from the wastewater. That's, again, kind of the whole point of the septic systems. It removes about 1/2 of the organic strength. So again, it's not nearly as strong as coming out of there, not nearly as toxic. It prepares the wastewater for soil-based final treatment. That's what I was talking about there. That water gets pumped out through. Once that water is pumped out through, and then it kind of trickles down within the water system. Looking at advanced pre-treatment, it provides additional treatment within there if you have a particularly strong set of solids or issues. For sites that have limiting conditions, organic strength reduction, any sort of disinfection or nutrient reduction as well. So thinking about final treatment happens in the soil. So this is the soil doing its natural job. The primary purpose of pre-treatment is to protect the soil system. Again, we don't want any of those solids or contaminants affecting the soil itself because we want it to be as healthy as possible. So they can naturally treat and filter that water and make sure that it's safe. The soil system removes many of the waste products and it returns the water back to the water cycle. So it's doing its natural job. So this is looking at, kind of a conventional treatment train. The majority of on-site wastewater treatment systems have this layout. They have collection, so where the waste is going to be collected. Then it gets pumped into the soil or the septic tank. It then goes through the septic tank process where those solids are separated, and then it gets pushed into the soil treatment area as you can kind of see that final area there, and that is where it actually leaches out and starts regaining and going back into the groundwater and the water system. Wastewater treatment, it begins in the house collection. So when we talk about that, we have kind of two separate categories. We have our black water and our gray water. Black water is going to be things from toilets, kitchen sink, dishwashers. So the things with the most amount of waste within them. Then we're going to be talking about gray water, and that's going to be your laundry and your shower. That's water that has contaminants in it, but it's not nearly as bad as black water, and it's not the same type of contaminants. It's not food or anything. It's mostly dirt and grime. So just kind of looking at the chart here, typically a shower is going to be 20% of the wastewater. Toilets are going to be 24. Clothes washers are going to be 16. Faucets 20. Leaks 13%. And then we have the always great other, and that's going to be 5.3%. Now that is based on a typical size family. Obviously, if you have less individuals in the household, or more individuals, or more children, or you're doing laundry, on a regular basis, that is going to change slightly. But for the most part, that's kind of our typical breakdown. So you want to separate the solids from the water. Again, this is kind of the most important part we're talking about. The septic tank separation is based on the density relative to the water. Density greater than the water, it sinks and it becomes sludge, as we can kind of see there on the bottom. Density, if it's less than the water, it floats and it becomes scum. So it's going to go to one of the two places. It's either going to go to the bottom or to the top. And we're kind of looking really for that middle ground is where we're looking at, where treatment can be done, and the bugs and the natural bacteria in there can begin to really kind of break down a lot of those things. Here we can kind of see a basic example of a septic tank there on the right. You have your access risers at the top. Those are for the homeowner or the owner of the septic system to be able to know that they have access to the septic system, that they can kind of get down into there and do any sort of maintenance. There on the very left, we have the inlet. So that is where the wastewater is going to be pumped from the household. It then goes through to the first chamber there. And that's where we have our sludge, our scum, and our effluent. The effluent being the water there in the middle. It's then will hopefully get separated and move into that second chamber there. You had some septic tanks have an effluent filter. Those are optional. They're not required, but you can have one if you want to filter out more of it, if you're particularly worried about your soil or any solids or anything coming out. It will then go into the outlet, into the treatment of the dispersal system. So they're pretty basic, in all honesty. I mean, they're not super complicated things. They can be as well. Earlier in the month, I actually went to a establishment in Massachusetts where it's trying different types of alternative septic tanks. So they probably have 25 different septic tanks buried in the ground that they're trying all different models and all different things that can be changed with them. But your basic household's going to have your 2-chamber septic tank, more than likely made out of concrete. And they're typically going to be between 1,500 gallons to 2,000 gallons. Obviously, they can go larger than that, but you don't want to go much smaller than that. And that's purely because once you get smaller and everything gets condensed in there, it becomes a lot harder for the septic tank to do its natural job. So you're going to look at your inlet and outlet baffles, kind of what we were talking about there. Baffles help keep the layer separated. They allow the clarified wastewater to move to the soil treatment area. Wastewater entering the tank displaces an equal volume out of the tank. So again, you want that constant equal value as well to make sure that you have that. So you want to have those baffles. One thing you always want to make sure of is that inlet section and those baffles themselves do not get clogged. If you have basically had something go through the wastewater system that isn't supposed to, or can have a clog within there and have any issues, once those get clogged, they can cause backup. And that backup will unfortunately be back up into your household, which obviously is something that no one wants. So always make sure, and if you do have any backup, that's going to be where you're going to look at first. is to see if your inlet or that entering baffle is clogged in any sort of way. And you obviously want to remove that clog, but make sure, and sometimes they can get things over there in the period of time as well. A little bit of buildup, one or two things, and obviously over the course of time, if you have a number of buildups, then you're going to have that issue as well. So you constantly want to check the inlet and the baffles. Solids retained in the septic tank. So you have your sludge layer, like we had discussed, and some degradation of organic solids. Not all solids are biodegradable. Anaerobic conditions without dissolved oxygen. So again, kind of thinking that not all solids are going to be biodegradable, but the majority of them are going to be. But we want to make sure that we have that sludge layer. And then we have our scum layer. That's fat, oils, grease, fogs, and soap. So when we talk about grease, we're not talking traditional grease. We're talking about more things like soaps, lotions, that type of things. Fats are from animal sources, oils are from plant sources, and greases are from petroleum projects, such as like skincare products, some type of shampoos, some types of lotions, some types of body washes, that type of thing. So that's kind of what more we're talking about. Oils are again going to be from your plant sources, and you never want to be sending animal fat down your septic tank. So again, any sort of grease, bacon grease or hamburger grease, that does not need to go in your septic tank. That needs to be drained elsewhere within the household and thrown away. Another thing to note is if you do have a homeowner who has a garbage disposal, those are not great for septic tanks either. Basically, things can go down them that are not going to be broken down, inorganic compounds, even different types of foods, and basically they're going to clog your septic tank over a period of time because those are not going to be completely biodegradable. So the biggest suggestion is if you do run into a homeowner with a septic tank and a garbage disposal, they probably should just unhook that garbage disposal. Now we're going to be looking at our clarified layer. The outlet baffle prevents the scum layer from leaving the tank. So again, we don't want that scum layer leaving the tank. We want it staying in there, obviously, because it's not been fully biodegraded. This clarified wastewater is called septic tank effluent. So that is going to be what that water going out of the septic tank into the distribution is called. Challenging sites and use may require advanced pretreatment. So again, if you have any areas that could be particularly challenging, advanced pretreatment creates a clean effluent prior to final treatment and disposal, degradation of organic compounds, disinfection, and nutrient removal. So again, those are all things that you can use as advanced pretreatment if you're having a particular issue with your septic tank and getting those things broken down. So looking at organic strength reduction, it's aerobic treatment units, ATUs. Aerobic conditions are provided by bubbling air through the effluent. So you're going to have a bubbler in there to make sure that you're pumping in that oxygen and making sure that you have everything there. Bacteria digest the organic compounds that become sludge, and some nutrients are removed within that. So basically you're going to be adding an air pump into your septic system to make sure that that you basically are working everything a little bit over time. Again, you can have media filters. Aeration provides as effluent trickles down through the media. Bacteria fixed to the media digest the organic compounds as well. So that is another option that you can put in. As you can see here, you have your septic tank, and then you're going to have your pump tank afterwards. So it's an additional cost, an additional component to the system. So it is works great, but you are talking additional costs and additional pieces that could break over the period of time. Again, you can also have a constructed wetland. Effluent moves just above or just below the media surface. So again, it's going to be going just above or just below there. Aeration is provided from the atmosphere and by photosynthesis. And roots serve as an attachment for bacteria. So again, that's kind of a more natural way to be doing that. But again, We are talking, I mean, you're going to have your gravel, so it's pretty basic there, but you might have some issues finding the space to be able to put it in. That is something that we always kind of run into in finding areas. Disinfection. So you're talking about the destruction of pathogens. We're talking about measured as E. coli, fecal coliforms, or total coliforms. Used when there's a greater risk of coming into contact with partially treated wastewater. So again, this is going to be mostly about your drainage. We see some of this where we have spatial issues, especially in areas that have not been properly zoned for septic tanks, or areas where septics basically were put in before we really were worried about where they were draining and how they were being drained. I've seen a couple of towns that kind of have this issue. And essentially, what can happen is you end up having partially treated water running into the streets as opposed to running in through the soil, and that naturally taking care of it. With conventional systems, we use the soil for removal of pathogens, but not all sites have sufficient soil. So again, kind of those smaller areas or smaller space, that would be kind of an example of that where this could come in handy. So with that, you want to look at a tablet feeder. So it's going to be chlorine, calcium hypochlorite tablets. The effluent passes through the tablet feeder where the chlorine is dissolved into the water. So you're kind of treating it again with that chlorine the same way you would drinking water. It is only used after advanced pretreatment. So again, you're going to have your advanced pretreatment, and then you're going to have that kind of go through. You can also going to have ultraviolet light. UV light damages the DNA. Bacteria cannot reproduce. Effluent passes through the chamber that is illuminated by the UV light, and it is only used again after advanced pretreatment. So you got to see how it works there. You're going to have flow from an advanced pretreatment system. Again, it's going to flow through that UV light, and it will flow into the final treatment and dispersal. And that UV light is going to remove any of that bacteria so it cannot reproduce. So this is a little bit of a smaller option than the chlorine tablets to be able to use. So moving between treatment components, where possible, on-site wastewater treatment systems are based on gravity. So again, you want to look at the topography of the land and understand exactly how the gravity is going to work and how that's going to go through. Each component is at a slightly lower elevation than the previous one. So you want to make sure that those components are lined up that way. One thing you always want to make sure is that the soil hasn't shifted and has kind of thrown any of this off. Sometimes pumps are added when we need to lift wastewater to the next component. So again, basically putting in a very small lift station, and it assists with uniform distribution. And that's really important. We want that uniform distribution. We want that water going through as evenly as possible. So pumps, pump tanks, and controls. A pump system generally consists of a pump tank, usually sized to hold a 2-day wastewater volume, a dose pump to transfer the contents to the next component, and controls to activate and deactivate the pumps, and also sound an alarm. You want that alarm on there, so it'll let you know if that pump is no longer working, if there's been a power outage. Really kind of figure out what's wrong with that pump, because again, if that pump does go bad, you can have potential backup of sewage within your household. So here, kind of looking at the pump tank, it accumulates wastewater until the next pump cycle. Pump will activate at present time or preset fluid levels. It must have access from the surface. So, you want it properly wired to control the separate pump and alarm unit. So you want to have that there. Sometimes these alarms are put next to the septic system, and sometimes they are built onto the household themselves. One thing I have noticed is if they are put next to the septic tank, they're great. But at the same time, you might not always hear that alarm when it's going off. So it is something that you want to check every now and then to make sure that that alarm isn't going off and you're having an issue with your pump. You also have your watertight lid, tank, and penetrations. And that goes to the soil treatment and the pre-treatment unit. In the bottom there, you have from the septic tank to the pre-treatment unit, the sludge. And again, that's your alarm level, your pump on and pump off, and your proper pump there at the bottom. So talk about pumps there, submersible pumps. They have fractional horsepower, so I mean they're not using that much energy. Minimum power consumption. So again, it's not something that you have to worry about. That way, as far as if your energy bill is going to go up significantly, if you do have to install one of these, and they typically last 7 to 10 years. So that's typical. A lot of that's going to be based on use. If it's being used on regular basis, you might have a little less than that. If you're not using it nearly as much as an average household would, you might have a little bit more on that. But 7 to 10 years is where we're typically looking at. So talking about your controls, floats, floats and timers. Floats indicate the fluid level in the tank. So again, making sure that that fluid level is not getting too low or too high. It activates and deactivates pumps as needed. So that's what's going to be turning them on, turning them off, making sure they're working. And panels can provide information about pump operation. So again, those can show what you need on there, what proper maintenance needs to be, what you need to be checked out, and what you need to be concerned about. After pretreatment, the effluent moves to a soil-based final treatment. The soil is very powerful in wastewater treatment systems. It has biological properties, chemical properties, and physical properties. So the soil must allow for that treatment to happen. I'd say this is probably going to be, the end of the process, but one of the most important ones is making sure that that water has the ability to go out and re-enter the water table and the water system. The soil is a complex media. A suitable soil allows biodegradation, nutrient conversion, binding with minerals, plant uptake, and deep percolation of water. Again, so you're going to have microcolonies of bacteria in the complexity of the soil. It's going to go through there. So you have your quartz, your air, your organic matter, your clay particles. So all portions of the soil within there. So applying the effluent to the soil, and again, the effluent is going to be that partially treated water that is coming out of the septic system. It is not like fully disinfected yet, but it's basically the best it can get. You have trench-based dispersal. So gravel and other media provide storage where effluent inflows is greater than the infiltration into the soil. You can also have infiltrative surface, mostly on a trench bottom, and some infiltration on sidewalls. So kind of seeing there's an example of it there. You have your soil cover and then your distribution media. We're talking about dispersal into the soil, provides separation between humans and our waste. So again, talking about public health, that's going to be the most important part. We don't want anything getting in that water, drinking that water, or being near it. It provides a means of preventing our waste from becoming an environmental contaminant. Talking about environmental health, and it is a natural means of reinnovation. Common dispersal methods. You have gravity, pressurized spray, combined treatment, and dispersal. Most of the ones that we see around here are going to be gravity, just because we have the proper type of soil and topography for it. Pressurized and spray, not so much, but I'm sure you can't. It's like anything. If the circumstances are right, you might come across them. So looking at a conventional septic system, it's going to be gravity distribution. So the influent enters the trench there. Once it goes through the trench, it moves by gravity to the distal end. There can be issues with poor distribution and uniformity, depending on how it kind of goes within that trench. But it is the least amount of maintenance, purely because it's all kind of natural there. Once you put the pipes in the ground, they're pretty much going to stay there unless they have any sort of cracks or any kind of issues there. So kind of seeing that's kind of a great example of it on the side, showing that it goes from the septic tanks to the distribution box. Once it goes into the distribution box, the wastewater is then distributed into those 3 pipes, and as they go through, it's going to distribute it into the soil, which is then going to treat the water naturally. So looking at a low pressure pipe system, it's pressurized distribution. It provides a good application of uniformity along the trench length. It operates at approximately 7 psi, but it It does need a pump tank and pump and controls. So unlike the other one that was kind of naturally done with gravity with very low maintenance, this one you're talking about pump tanks, pump controls, and the things needed for that. And again, with that always means that you're going to have a little bit more maintenance and the potential for something to break, which then can cause an issue with the septic tank. You can also have a drip distribution system. It's drip irrigation technology. It's slow, precise application. Is often used in less permeable soils. So again, if you have a soil that is particularly high in something that is not allowing that wastewater to penetrate it and kind of go through there, this is an option for that. It is a pressurized system, so it does have filter pumps and controls as well. I mean, so a lot of what your choices are going to be just based on the soil that you have in your land and around you. Particularly, is it high in clay? Is it high in any sort of particular nutrients? And what are going to be the issues around there? Looking at a spray field, it can provide excellent application and uniformity but it does have risks. It must be properly managed with disinfection. Spray fields should be fenced, and you should only spray them at night. Again, because this one you're literally spraying the water, it's going to be, it's not naturally going through, it's actually being pumped out. So that's why we want to make sure that that disinfection is there, because it's going to be a little bit stronger. And we want to make sure it's fenced so we don't have anyone getting near it or getting sick from it. So combined treatment and dispersal in low permeable soils, there is a risk that organic compounds and biosolids will clog the infiltrative surface at the bottom of the trench. Likewise, in shallow soils, additional treatment that the soil cannot provide may be needed. These dispersal system modifications can be provided with extra treatment. So again, you can combine a few of them. It's not all a one-off. Looking at a sand line trench. It's an in-trench media filter. It provides additional treatment in the trench. Air moves through the sand, allowing aerobic conditions and attached bacteria growth on the sand. Talking about a mound system here. Again, this kind of thinking about how much space you have and the soil that you have. It provides treatment by trickling effluent through the media. It does provide water clarification, organic removal, and limits potential from soil clogging. It's used at sites with very shallow soil. So again, if you have a particular soil issue, shallow soils or any of those issues there, that is where it's going to be used the most. Non-soil based dispersal and disposal in locations where conditions allow, there are other means of returning effluent back into the water cycle. Transportation beds, lagoons, and direct discharge would be some of those. Kind of looking at a lagoon system. Again, not very common around here for individuals to have lagoons in in their household, but I have seen it particularly out east. It provides treatment of aerobic near water the surface and anaerobic in deeper water. Holds effluent by during dry season. Again, so during that dry season, it's going to hold there. Discharges during wet season when distribution water is available. So it is an option. Evap transportation beds. Water goes into the gas phase. So it goes through plants, and that's transpiration. And then from liquid water, that's going to be your evaporation. This is going to be used in dry climates only. So again, probably more out west. Not going to be something we see a lot here. And again, direct discharge. Influent is discharged in a surface water. Very few on-site wastewater treatment systems are allowed to direct discharge. It requires extensive regulatory permitting from the national. Basically, it might require an NPDES permit, which then would make them basically a wastewater system, which makes them regulated by the IEPA and no longer the Department of Public Health. And it requires extensive treatment before discharge. So again, probably not going to see a whole lot of that. So wrap up this section, we have reviewed how the on-site wastewater treatment systems work, and we evaluated the various methods used to disperse the influent into the soil and how kind of that works. So with that, we do have another section here we can move to. And we'll go over some of this real quick. So again, this is just going to be overview and management of your system. So we're going to explain the safety and land use issues related to septic tanks and describe the needed maintenance on your septic tank. Again, there are risks with having a septic tank like anything. Gases produced are flammable and hazardous to humans in high levels. So again, that's why you want to avoid any sort of backup, especially in your distribution, going in or out. Wastewater contains pathogens which make people sick. That's a pretty obvious one, but it is good to know. Tanks and systems can contain 4 or more feet of water, which child pets and even adults could potentially drown in. This is actually an issue that does occur from time to time. So just making sure that those tanks are going to be properly sealed and no one can have access to them. Tanks and other components could collapse if driven over with heavy equipment. So again, that's another thing. You want to make sure that you know where your septic system is and you have a kind of basic map of it. So again, you don't have any of that heavy equipment or they're being driven over. You never want to enter your septic tank. I don't know why you would, but just in case you're trying to fix something on your own, you want to hire a professional to do that for you. Do not smoke or have a fire near the septic tank and the tank openings. Again, that could be due to some of those poisonous flammable gases. And overall, it's a bad idea. Do you have the flames and open flames near them? If wastewater is on the surface, the issue must be corrected. So again, if that wastewater is on the surface, that means that you have a major issue and you're essentially could have an issue with bacteria and getting people sick if they're exposed to that water. Do not use electrical tools near the water or wet ground as it could cause a shock or explosion. Keep vehicles and other heavy equipment off of the septic tank and assure all lids are secured in place to prevent any entry at all times. So again, that's a big one. And best way to do that are, you have your big concrete lids that you're going to be able to put on there. I've seen some plastic ones that go on. Unfortunately, the plastic ones have a tendency to crack or break in the winter. So you would probably want to do something a little bit more substantial than that. So really your best bet's going to be your concrete. Hiring a qualified professional. Operation and maintenance service provided is trained and is typically licensed to clean out tanks. And again, you want to have this done annually. And again, if you don't think you need it done annually, at least every couple of years to have all those components that we had just previously talked about in your system checked out. Service advanced treatment systems. You want to evaluate soil treatment area. Make sure that that soil treatment area is still working, that that soil is active, that it's still, the nutrients are still doing the things they're supposed to. You want to make any sort of repairs, sample systems, and you want to report results to the permitting authority when required.
In 1 in 5
We have a video here.
In 1 in 5 households in the United States depend on septic systems to treat their wastewater. A properly maintained septic system safeguards your family's health, protects the environment, and can save you thousands of dollars on repairs. What can I do to protect my system? Quick tip number 5. Protect it and inspect it. Residential septic systems should be regularly inspected by a service provider.
Hi, I'm Mike. I inspect septic systems throughout Northern Virginia. A typical septic tank inspection includes measuring the scum thickness, or grease, at the top of the tank, as well as the solids that accumulate on the bottom. This will help us to determine how well sewage flows through the tank and how often it needs to be pumped. Your local service providers can also inspect for leaks or other potential issues as well. To determine how often your system should be inspected, consider these factors: your system type and size, the size of your household, and the amount of water you use. While many houses have conventional gravity systems that typically need to be inspected every 1 to 3 years, those with advanced treatment systems or electrical components such as pumps should be inspected annually at a minimum. An inspection today can prevent a costly repair tomorrow.
So do your part to be septic smart. Contact your service provider to learn how often your system should be checked. Inspecting your septic system regularly can save you money and protect you and your family's health.
All right. So as you saw there, that tool that he was using, putting it down in the septic tank, that is something called a sludge judge. And any proper septic tank professional will have one. And what that's going to do is that's actually how they're measuring how much sludge is in there and measuring to see if the septic tank needs to be pumped or what needs to be done. So again, looking at that maintenance, every 1 to 5 years, the septic tank should be evaluated for the need for the tank for cleaning, pumping. Again, a lot of this is going to be based on members of the household and usage. Intervals is dependent on the size of the tank, water use, and habits within the home. Solids must be removed to prevent them from potentially overloading advanced pre-treatment or soil treatment area and backing wastewater up into the structure, causing surfacing or both. Septic tank maintenance continued. There are devices to measure the sludge and the scum. Again, talk about that sludge judge. Tank cleaning is needed when more than 25% of the tank is storing sludge and scum. When tank is clean, backflushing and or stirring is needed to make sure the tank's contents get the sludge off the bottom. So again, you want to make sure that your professional is stirring that up and getting everything when we're pumping it, so it gets it all. Tank cleaning with correct access. Tank must be cleaned through a large manhole, at least 20 inches. If you have a smaller one of these, you might have issues. May require digging up at access. It's recommended to be at grade, and 4 to 6 inch inspection ports should not be used. So again, you want to have a little bit bigger inspection ports than that. We see these occasionally where they have to be dug up to find them, but most installers now are putting them above ground because they're realizing the importance of being able to access that.
Most
So we have
residential
another
septic
video
tanks
here.
should be pumped every 3 to 5 years. Some types of specialized or advanced treatment systems may require more frequent pumping and other maintenance.
Hi, I'm Robert, septic pumper in Northern Virginia. Your septic tank contains 3 substances: effluent, scum, and sludge. Over time, scum or grease accumulates on the top level, while sludge or solids sit on the bottom. During a scheduled pump out, the operator uses a vacuum line to remove the buildup. The effluent or untreated wastewater travels from your drains to filters that separate the scum and the sludge. These filters should be taken out and cleaned during the pump out service. Follow recommendations from your service provider and local health department.
So do your part to be septic smart. To keep your system working in top condition, schedule to pump out your septic tank at appropriate regular intervals, and keep your maintenance records in a handy place so you know your system's service history.
Talk about effluent screen cleaning. Screen is washed off directly into the septic tank. Intervals may be more frequent than tank cleaning, such as every 6 months. So these might be even more than that, a year to 3 years. And this is being done at the inlet end of the tank to protect against debris going directly into the outlet. So again, you want to make sure that everything going in there can get out and you don't have cause any issues with that. And that's an example of him kind of cleaning those. Septic tank cleaning report. The service provider pumper should provide a report of anything, including the amount of sludge and scum, so you know how much was in there and how much was taken out. Any tank leakage that they noticed, again, just in case you have any tank leakage, this could cause potential issues in the future, so you can get those fixed. Any safety concerns with tank access, if there's any cracks or anything on the lid or anything where someone could potentially fall in there or have any issues. Troubleshooting or repairs needed or conducted, and request a report if you are not given one. So again, if one is not provided to you, then you need to request one. These are not needed, but they are beneficial. Additives to date have no third-party research to support them. So this is talk about things such as the Ridex and those type of things that are sold. They actually cause more issues than they provide, so they should not be used. These are marketed in the following ways. Starters, bacteria are abundant in the existing wastewater, so we don't need these. Feeders, wastewater contains a lot of food for the bacteria. And cleaners, some regulations ban the use of these products in septic tanks, as they may remove solids out of the septic tank that should be settled in. So again, for the most part, you should not be adding anything to your septic system. It basically is good on its own. So Ridex or any of those sort of products within there are not necessary. advanced pretreatment general maintenance, typically evaluated every 6 months to annually. Again, so this is if you have some of those advanced pretreatment systems that we had talked about. A sample of the effluent is collected and either a visual laboratory test is performed. Reporting to the permitting authority may be required, and you want to check the area of discharge. Typical maintenance on all soil treatment areas. So those fields that water is going to, professionals will evaluate surfacing of the effluent, make sure that it's not making it to the surface. The depth of the ponding and inspection ports, signs of traffic over the system, excessive surface water collecting over the system, and inappropriate vegetation growing over the system. So again, if you have a lot of vegetation growing over there, it can cause issues, and it can cause clogs. So you want to make sure that that is taken out or avoided. Typical maintenance with a gravity distribution system. So those are going to be your typical ones. The distribution device, header, drop, or distribution boxes. So kind of what we see there on the right should be opened, cleaned as needed, and adjusted to ensure equalized flow to the various lines. Again, these boxes, once they're in the ground, they're there, but they do have a tendency to shift over time. And things can move and the gravity can be affected where it's not actually all lined up. Once that is done, you're not going to have that even distribution. So one area of the distribution system is going to be getting significantly more effluent than in any of the other ones. So you want to make sure that is all even and distributed. Looking at a pressure soil treatment system, evenness of the distribution confirmed. So make sure that's coming out. And when cleanouts are available, the pipes are flushed and cleaned when needed. Typical maintenance of pumps and controls. During maintenance, confirm that the pump is working and set appropriately, accessible and replaced. You want to make sure it's elevated, and also you want to make sure, again, that you have that alarm and that alarm is properly working. And anyone who does an inspection will make sure that that is done for you. The tank with the pump may be needing cleaning if sludge is present, and the recording of run times and cycles on the pumps when available for the distribution and flows. Again, talking about record keeping, we want to make sure that we have all that. Some jurisdictions require that a report must be submitted to when the service is performed on the system. It is wise to keep records of your system's design, installation, and service reports, and the permitting authority may keep a copy of these records, but having a copy for yourself may be helpful when you go to sell your property.
Right. Confirm that your well water meets local drinking water standards by conducting a water quality test in your well once a year.
I'm Mike. I inspect well and septic systems throughout Northern Virginia. Testing your well water for harmful bacteria, contaminants, and acidity protects your family's health. It can also indicate if your septic system is functioning properly.
So do your part to be septic smart. Don't flush medications or excessive amounts of harmful chemicals down the drain or toilet, as they can also contaminate your well.
Test your well water at home or contact your local health department for assistance. You can also use a state-certified laboratory. Find one in your area by calling EPA's Safe Drinking Water Hotline.
Ensuring your well water is safe to drink will protect you and your family's health. Catching potential problems early may also help you minimize costs to remedy any problems with your well.
So talking about your private well, you want to have it tested. And one of the things that you're testing for is basically to make sure that that septic tank isn't leaking. And if it is leaking, it's not affecting the drinking water that you have. So, I mean, if you think about it, septic tanks are buried in the ground. So is your groundwater. So if that septic tank isn't properly containing everything it's supposed to, then you're going to have an issues with that. Chloroform bacteria, you want to do that every year. Nitrates every other year. Nitrates being a big issue with septic tanks. So again, if septic tanks are leaking, you're going to see nitrates, arsenic, lead, and manganese before a baby drinks the water, especially manganese being kind of one of those emerging contaminants we're seeing more and more of as well. So I want to make sure that you test for that. All right, so that is the conclusion of that. So we'll start this third one and we'll go for a few minutes and we'll go to 4 o'clock. This one's actually, so this is the last module here, this one is super useful for homeowners. So it says home management tips for them. So again, wastewater and estimated generation. Residential systems typically use bedrooms to predict the maximum occupancy use. That's kind of what we use for that, and that's how we decide the size of our septic tanks. Assuming 2 people per bedroom, most regulatory agencies specify a hydrodynamic loading rate in the range of 100 to 150 gallons per day per bedroom. So you want to try to conserve water. And based on the annual estimates of actual use per person per year, that's going to be 27,000 gallons of water a year. Typical home of 3 is going to be 58,000, and 250 homes in an area 14.5 million gallons a year. So let's talk about kind of our water usage. But if we think about the water usage, we have to think about any of that water that goes down the drain is obviously going into our septic tank. So what is added to the water? Pathogens, viruses, bacteria, solids, organic and inorganics, nutrients, and chemicals. So tips to lessen the load for septic systems longevity.
Be aware of your household's water use. Efficient water use improves the operation of the septic system and reduces the risk of failure. Septic systems can only handle a set amount of water. Avoid overburdening your system by staggering your water use. If your household is running a shower, the washing machine, and dishwasher at the same time, you increase the risk of a sewage backup in your home or a flooded septic drain field in your yard. So do your part to be septic smart. Spread out your water use throughout the day, conserve water, and look for the Energy Star and WaterSense labels when purchasing water-based appliances. Not straining your drain can save you money and protect you and your family's health.
All right. So some general recommendations here. Listen for drips and leaks and fix all internal plumbing leaks. Choose appliances that offer water and energy efficient cycles. Do not use your toilet or septic system as a garbage can. Place this water in the garbage. Again, talking about, certain things that we want to flush and not flush. Limit the use of harsh cleaners and sanitizers as they kill beneficial bacteria in there. So think about, if you're using toilet cleaner or anything like that with particular bleach in it, well, it's going to clean your bathroom. Once that water's flush, it is going to potentially kill that bacteria that's breaking down the solids within the septic system. You want to use products that are natural or biodegradable. And there's a list there that will tell you which ones are good.
Load the commode. Remember, your toilet is not a trash can. Here's some easy advice. Do not flush anything besides human waste and toilet paper. Everything that goes down your toilet ends up in your septic system. Items such as diapers and baby wipes, hygiene products, cigarette butts, and cat litter belong in the trash, not your toilet. They do not decompose in your septic tank and can shorten the life of your system. Harsh chemicals from drain cleaners and some cleaning products can also harm your septic system and should be used sparingly. Flushing such items down the toilet can clog your pipes and damage your septic system, which can result in costly repairs. So do your part to be septic smart. Always dispose of these non-flushable items in the trash.
So bathroom recommendations. The toilet is the number one water user in the house, as we talked about before. That's going to be 24% of the water. Replace old 5-gallon flush toilets with low or dual flush toilets. So use 1.6 gallons per flush or less, and fix leaking problems. Typically, a simple gasket that is not replaced can add hundreds of gallons of water per day. So you want to make sure that everything is leaking, or everything is not leaking there, and everything is working again. Because we're trying to avoid any sort of backup where we're pumping too much water into the septic tank at once and it cannot handle it. Continued. Many toilets cleaners are very hard. Again, anything with chemicals in there, they're going to kind of kill that good bacteria that you want. You do not want to use automatic sanitizers. Small amount of elbow grease. Only put human waste and toilet paper in the toilet. So Kleenexes, Q-tips, any of that cannot go down there. Talking about bathing, take shorter showers versus baths. Again, because that's going to allow a bath is obviously you're going to be draining all that water at once. So it's going to be a high amount of volume going into the septic. Use low flow fixtures under 2 gallons per minute. Avoid daily cleaners. Daily cleaners are hard on the system, again, because that's going to go down there and it's going to kill there any of that bacteria. There are no more effective than regular soap. The less soap and cleaners, the better, again, because we want to make sure to preserve that bacteria. Clearing clogged drains. Use adequate strainers in all drains from sinks, showers, tubs, laundry, and expensive metal or plastic drain screens. When drains do plug, it's usually in the trap below the sink, so you want to start there before you do anything major. You want to avoid using liquid plumber or anything of that nature that is going to kind of go down there. And while it may unclog that drain, it could also have potential harm on your septic tank. So potentially just cleaning out that trap is going to be easier. And the majority of products sold to clear drains will damage the microbes in your septic tank. Laundry. And this one's always a hard one for us because my wife likes to do all the laundry on one day. And I know a lot of people have that kind of concept of, Sunday or Monday wash day, but you actually want to kind of spread it out throughout the week. You also want to install front loading machines. You want to think even and throughout the week and throughout the day. Doing it all at once does cause issues, and it's going to send all of that water into the septic tank and cause potential backup. Adding washing machine lint filters. Washing clothing releases a lot of lint, much of which is inorganic. A simple screen on the discharge line can help prevent this, and purchase and install after market lint filter. So again, talk about laundry, limit bleach and other products, limit detergent to the minimal amount needed to get clothing clean. Inexpensive powders contain clay as filler. Those are going to cause major issues, so you don't want to use those. Do not use liquid fabric softeners. And you want to add a half cup of baking soda or vinegar or both. Dryer balls or anti-static aluminum foil balls are all kind of alternatives to that. Talk about your kitchen. You want to run a full dishwasher. Again, you don't want to waste any water there, so you want to make sure you're maximizing. You want to make sure you use phosphate-free detergents. So again, kind of looking at those. Thawing food in the refrigerator versus underwater. Again, making sure that none of that water is being run through there. And you want to eliminate or reduce the use of garbage disposal or grinder. I would suggest not having one at all. All right, so with that, that is 4 o'clock. So that's where we said we were going to end. So does anyone have any questions?
There's no questions on this end.
All right. Well, with that, I thank everybody for listening to me here. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me and I'll be able to answer them. As of right now, we do have a private well program in the state of Illinois, so we can help well users. We are working on a private septic system. From what I've been told, it will be coming out this spring. So we will be able to basically be able to inspect private or do inspections of septic systems and offer education with that as well. But with that, thank you, everybody, and have a good afternoon and the rest of your day.
Thank you, James, so much for your presentation. And thank you all for participating in our 2-day virtual session. I believe the recording will be made available to you all at a later date. Be on the lookout for an email that has kind of that information. But that's all I have for you all today. Thank you so much, and see you next time.